Welcome to this episode of Rock Nation Podcast. Rock Nation Podcast is an outreach of the ROC Center here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And the ROC Center stands for Renewing Our City. And our guest today is LaSharon Taylor. And LaSharon, we met, my wife and I started going to New City Church, and that's where we met LaSharon, and we have the opportunity to serve together in worship and choir and that. But I have come to learn that there's much more to LaSharon Taylor than that. And so LaSharon, thanks for being on the program.
Yep, no problem. Thank you for inviting me, Steve. Appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit, and again, today's subject, just so to let folks know, is we want to talk about historical or healing from historical violence. How do we begin healing in our home after racial, social, and injustice and civil unrest? And so that's the nature of our call today, or our talk today. Where it'll go exactly, we don't know, but that's going to be the head subject matter. So tell us a little bit about yourself, LaSharon.
Sure, yes. So I am a licensed mental health counselor in Cedar Rapids. I'm based out of Cedar Rapids. My address is 3330 Southgate Court, Southwest. And the name of the company is Tailored Life Transitions Counseling. And what we specialize there is racialized trauma, combat-related trauma, also just change of life events. That's typically who I've been working with, or people who are struggling with change of life events and adjustments. And what led me to this is that I am a veteran. I am still serving in the Kansas Army National Guard. I experienced racialized and sexual related trauma in the military. I've learned how to overcome those. I'm a survivor, and I've learned how to overcome a lot of those difficulties. And the difficulties I experienced in the military was not necessarily knowing how to pinpoint what it is that I was experiencing at the time. Like, I knew that there were things I was experiencing and that they were wrong. I knew that they fell in line with the equal opportunity, that it was out of compliance with equal opportunity regulations. And then trying to walk that fine line of, do I address this? How do I address this? And ultimately, I was able to find a space for myself. And as I was finding that space for myself, I learned that through counseling. My therapist was a Caucasian lady and was a white lady. And even though she wasn't able to necessarily understand, because she also had a background in substance use, the experiences in, addressing those difficulties, substance use disorders, which I also specialize in with an international alcohol and drug counseling certification. We learned how to overcome a lot of the barriers I experienced. So together, and being how I was raised in the church, that we don't just rise up for ourselves, we reach out and try to help other people. And that's what I do with Tailored Life. And that's why I'm here today, talking with you, Steve.
And where can folks find out more information about Tailored Life? What's the web address?
So it's, the easiest place to find me is on Psychology Today. The easiest place to find me is on Psychology Today. You can just look up LaSharon Taylor, and you'll be able to find me. Or if people are looking for a person of color, you can actually type in on Psychology Today, African American therapists, and I would show up on there along with the 8 other therapists in the Lynn County area who specialize in racialized trauma.
Well, thank you on behalf of Rock Nation and the community for the work that you do, and being able to take. And I think this is a message too that we want to encourage, is those individuals that do go through trauma. to be able to then take that and to do like you're doing. Now you're transitioning and now you're helping others that have gone through trauma and things of that nature. And so thank you very much for that work. And I'd like to, again, as we talk about historical violence, and you deal a lot with families, correct? You deal a lot with families and work with families. And so I would assume, just as any trauma, there's adults handle things differently than children. And but if we attempt to work with children and assist children as we do adults, it's not going to work. How do we have these difficult conversations with about racial issues and the complexity of it and all? How do we have those conversations with our youth?
Okay. Well, the best way for families that I found is by introducing it through literature. So if you find any books, like there's a New York Times article that had some really great books that I was able to utilize to begin introducing those concepts. But I also introduced to my patients about just like diversity in general. There's one through Gabby Garcia, and she talks, it's called I Can Do Hard Things. It introduces just diversity in general. So beginning to build that relationship of, there's diversity among all of us. And it has really good pictures of different people of colors and different races and even abilities, physical abilities, and limitations in that book. And it's free right now, by the way, on Amazon Kindle. And if you have Amazon Kindle subscription, and in that book, it just introduces those, concepts of how you can do hard things, how you can live and breathe through resistance, just normal resistance. So I try to set that foundation of building your own children up, letting them know you are capable, you are good enough. If someone else learned at this level, that doesn't mean that you can't do it as well. So someone else is doing something, it doesn't mean that you can't do it too. Beginning to build that level. And then as you're thinking about racial and social distress, we break it down to what that looks like in the home. So we give those simple examples of, okay, so do you remember when mommy wasn't listening, or when dad wasn't listening and we were on our cell phones and you kept on asking us for something that you needed? And being able to break it down to that level of understanding. If you're working with teens, you're talking about, okay, remember you kept on telling me you need to get to this location, you need to get to that appointment, you need to see your friends. And I said, well, I'm too busy for this, but you're trying to tell me that social interaction is really what you're needing right now. You need to be away from, you need to be around some people who are around your age. Like understanding what that feels like and what you, like them as a child, end up doing to act out at times, so that we can communicate in another way. What are the other ways that we're communicating in the home? And what does that look like at a larger scale? So just beginning to express that and communicate that on those small levels to say, hey, this is what this is what social and civil unrest starts to look like on a larger scale. And that way, youth and families, they're able to understand that. I found
there's obviously there's a lot of complexity to this issue. Do you expose them to what aspects of this issue do you expose them to? Is it I would assume perhaps dependent upon their age level. How do we go about measuring how much we expose them to this issue and the evils or the goods, whatever that might be?
Okay, so I found that you can limit the exposure as much as your family's understanding is. If your understanding is not at the level of I can, completely articulate this to my child, or I need help articulating this, then you limit the exposure based on that. You still want to provide your children, especially when they're smaller age, a really healthy sense of security. And because if they don't feel safe in their home and they're having nightmares and things like that, that starts to bring additional and unnecessary distress, we found. But it's still important to not cut them off completely. So what we found is that instead of having images up, just like in the 1930s and 40s where you listen to a radio or you listen to a podcast, that your children might hear some of what's going on, but they don't have to see everything. That visual images do stick with children much more long-term than, other media outlets.
At what point do you begin to, and again, this is all, it's going to be measured, and there's not going to be a one size fits all, right? But at what point do you begin then to introduce them into peaceful ways of addressing these particular issues, be it marching, protesting, at what point, does a family decide, this is a safe environment for me to do this, and safe in the sense of for their own psyche and mental health? At what point you begin to maybe introduce that, and can you share a little bit about the power and the positive impact of those types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard things like from 5-year-olds wanting to create signs for people who are protesting, to be for us as parents or caregivers to go ahead and support them with those things. That if they have a voice, that means that we're seeing, hearing, and believing them when they're telling us that they've got something inside of them that they want to share. In fact, like when we're tying that to any Christian values, that holds true to the virtue of testimony, of just being able to share what the Holy Spirit is telling you, or in terms of mental health, we call that intuitive intelligence, what your intuition is telling you that you need to do, and to be able to trust those things. So we can talk to them about that at that level. And then also, as far as people's mental health, when they know that being in large crowds, for instance, you're struggling with generalized anxiety and panic attacks, going to a large crowd in an event, or even with post-traumatic stress disorder too, going to large crowds and events, those are things that trigger you. Being able to assist ourselves and be gracious with ourselves and understand that all of us can have a role in this if we still want to be supportive. And that can come in the form of, making sandwiches, handing out water bottles, purchasing water bottles, making t-shirts, or even like helping other organizers with their Excel sheets and calling people back, following up on that, making donations, or raising funds for people at different levels that you're feeling passionate about. That when we're thinking about the civil rights movement itself, the freedom riders, they also had people making them sandwiches. That was just as much a part of their self-sustaining abilities to cope and not have to worry about certain things, like their basic needs, as being on the front lines. They're all important. So being able to address yourself, check in with yourself, and identify where you're at, and to be gracious with yourself in terms of how you can be a part of that. If you're on the front lines, we as parents, when we're concerned about our youths, about our teenagers, because they may not be regulated, we can absolutely put our foot down, because we know our youth, and say, I don't want you to go. I don't think this is good for you to go. Yeah. And, if you do go, you have consequences. So this is what these look like. Right. So, still being able to have those firm boundaries as parents is just as important during this time as anything else, especially when you know your child. So it's
Mhm.
really important to be able to share those things.
For those, we have, and I don't know again if this is going to be out before or after our weekend Saturday, have a protest here in town in Cedar Rapids.
Yes.
Be a protest and be a time at Green Square Park, and then a march following that. As you know, one of the questions that oftentimes brought up. Okay, you know, what's the benefit of protest, um, and what are the different portions of that, and how do they benefit? You know, obviously we see rioting, looting, those things, and a lot of that gets a lot of the media attention.
Mm-hmm.
And protests can be very peaceful, and unfortunately, a lot of those don't get the media attention. But walk us through protests. What's a benefit? Why certain things benefit? And I'm speaking from I was referring to myself the other day, you know, as a GWP, a geriatric white man. You know, I'm a 54-year-old, right? And you know, my experience with protests are not vast by any stretch of the imagination, and so help educate me as well on their purpose, their value, and potentially some dangers, if you will.
Okay, absolutely. So I will start with the purpose of a protest. So the purpose of a protest is for people who know that things are wrong and know that they need to be heard, is to be active in that process of their voices being heard. They may not have experienced injustice themselves, but they may have seen it and may not have spoken up at the time, or maybe they did and they just weren't heard. So when you're gathering together as a body, it's saying we're together, we're unified in this cause, we have this specific message that we want to share, and we're going to shout it out. We're, you know, we've tried to say things peacefully, we've tried to say things quietly, we've tried to be diplomatic. Maybe we have signed policy letters, and or maybe we have called our congressman or senator, and we just weren't heard. Perhaps we applied to sit on a board and we were denied. You know, those are all the reasons and purposes behind having a peaceful protest that's loud. Okay, so
Right.
where you're together, but you're loud, and you know you're
Right.
not going to be there quietly. That's actually a skill that we call being assertive. So you are not just you're not just being loud, but you're being assertive. That they know that you're serious, and it's coming from that regulated place when you're doing a peaceful protest. The other questions that you asked me was, you know, what are some of the dangers behind the protests?
Right.
The dangers of protests are that people who have malicious intent, that they can use that, just like any other medium of communication,
Right.
they can use that as an opportunity to introduce violence and hatred and anger, and
Yeah.
incite people with that. So to dysregulate them, to throw them off their center, and even in a lot of ways minimize the message of the majority who are present. So the dangers of that are people will see the negative, and even you know, police officers or peace officers, in some cases military members, they will see the dangers and respond to the danger versus seeing what the majority are doing. So that it's, you know, management by chaos. It's not a new tool. It's not
Right.
nothing new. We've seen this in the past as well. So being able to identify that as management by chaos, how can we shut this down? How can we minimize this and discredit it? We will, you know, try to incite violence or incite, you know, looting, and you know, discredit a whole group of people. So the
Right.
dangers of that are that you as a peaceful person can be lumped in with that group, and then, you know, not necessarily know how to protect yourself. So those are the dangers of protest.
Mm-hmm. And I recently saw just a short clip that speaks to that, where there was a young African American woman, and she was peacefully protesting, and a few ladies came up and started spray painting on a building, and spray painting slogans and different things, and she's and they were not African American. They had masks on, but you could tell they were not, and she was going, please stop doing this. We don't want you to do this, because then we'll be blamed. Don't do this. And that was just a prime example. Eventually they were able to get them away, but again, the damage had been done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's challenging, particularly with media today. Everybody has an angle, unfortunately. Whether it's right, left, in between, all of that. And I think it's challenging to be able to identify, to differentiate. And so in that discussion, is there, how do we go about doing that? How do we support, if we're not people of color, how do we support and work to ensure that the message is being heard, communicated, and these types of things don't happen, and therefore stealing away from the message?
Okay, yeah. So it's better in any relationship to come alongside, each other, just like in marriage or any other business relationship, when you may not agree on everything, but if you're in agreement on the primary message, which is that inequity needs to go, we need to address this. Being able to come alongside people is really important. So making those choices from an empowered place. So my white brothers and sisters, okay? So you can like one of my mentors, Angie Greeno, amazing woman, by the way, she has given me the invitation. She didn't push her intention or support onto me. She gave me the invitation. We also both practice yoga, and she's much more of an avid yogi than I, but she said one day that I sent my intention today to your kidneys, which means that she was praying over my body, because that's where sometimes we hold a lot of tension. So
Yeah.
You can do things on that end and just send a message of encouragement. You can come alongside and send the invitation, so that if we need to have that space and have the discussion with you, we can make that empowered choice to say, yes, I do want to talk with you. I do want to make sure you understand me. And that often opens up the opportunity for us to then just share and create that inclusion with you. Obviously there's the other things that I mentioned before. You can donate. There's like the Eastern Iowa Community Bond Project for people who are protesting. We know that some people are going to have already gone to jail, for peacefully protesting against police brutality and violence. So if that's something that's on your heart to do, please do that. And learn, educate yourself, just like in any other relationship, you're spending time getting to know them.
Yeah.
You can't do all the educating by hearing us. That actually puts us in a situation of being drained. So it's important for you to also just to observe, to read, to watch documentaries, also read those books of community inclusion to your children. Introduce your children to equity and inclusion. Like, those are the ways that we really need you to stand by us. And obviously support policies, support things that support equity. And if you're already trained in that, in reading the fine print, please do it.
Yeah. I oftentimes when you come into a situation where you begin to educate yourself, and you begin to align yourself with, and the temptation is to okay, I'm here to help, and it sounds like, I think even more so, and I had a friend that recently made connection with on Facebook, and a question that was posed by another one was, it was hashtag Black people, and then it was, how can your brothers and sisters in Christ that are not people of color, how can they support you? How can they best help you? And it was just a beautiful thing that she put out, of just simply saying, bottom line was, hey, just be there, support us, pray for us, love us, and only do that which God's telling you to do. Don't feel compelled that you have to do everything and be the hero, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's not empowerment. So
No,
you
it's not.
like another person rescuing us is not people learning how to feel empowered.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's the I joke with my wife, who and she would always relay the story of her dad would be teaching her how to mow the lawn, but it was 3/4 of the lawn would be done, and then he'd be, okay, here you go, but she never got to do it herself, and so there's always this learning curve is immense,
Yes.
because of that. But we have a tendency, I think, to geez, we want to right this wrong, but I think we have to be careful to recognize that our helping to right the wrong is, as you say, supporting, coming alongside.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
as we look at it from a systemic, and as we kind of begin to wrap up here, as we look at it from a systemic issue, I know this is a big question. We can take the whole program on it. What needs to begin to happen? What are some small things that that need to begin to happen?
The main small things are start in your home and then to your neighborhood. If you're a part of a neighborhood association, and there's one near you, begin, attending a few of those meetings out of the year. Like, you start with your home, you can easily, read a book to your kid, where your child, or to your family, or even listen to a podcast with your family. So you're all learning together. And then, go to your neighborhood association, if you belong to one, or even to your city council meetings. Begin to hear and read, some of those things from that systemic aspect. And if you have that ability, perhaps you have like closer relationships with your county, supervisors or county officials, attending those meetings, and, being willing to send an email or make a phone call. Even if you're not able to attend those meetings, read the minutes. You can read the minutes to a lot of these meetings online and say, hey, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
That, I see newspaper articles about that all the time, about how, editorial, hey, this happened and I don't agree with it. Why isn't this isn't a public vote? Those are the things that start to begin to create systemic changes.
Mm-hmm.
And, those are the things that I've also learned from, my community outreach, work in different civic organizations. So.
I appreciate you saying the part about, read them together or watch it together as a family, because I think as parents, as adults, we need to be there and for conversation, and to be able to add clarity and allow those questions to be answered. Because I remember, with certain questions come up that parents don't want to answer, as we're going up, we're going to find the answer somewhere.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
We're going to go out somewhere to find that answer. So if you as a parent or an adult, an appropriate adult, want to ensure that the proper dialogue is there, then we need to be the ones having those conversations. LaSharon, thank you again for being on. Hopefully this won't be the only time that you're on. Want to make this available. But is there anything that you'd like to add in closing at all? Again, I know it's a lot of things, But what encouragement can you share?
Right. Just remember to breathe and to enjoy each other, that we need to look at each other from a place of humanity and love each other for it, versus creating that division. Those are my closing comments.
All right. Thank you. Again, this has been Steve Wilson with the Rock Nation podcast. And our desire really is for real people and real relationships meeting real needs. And so we appreciate so much, LaSharon, you being a guest on the program.
Right. Thank you, Steve.
Bye, all. You bet.